Our second scripture lesson is John chapter 1, verse 5, and verses 16 through 18. Listen for the word of the Lord. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. There's a book we've read with our kids that's part of a collection of books featuring the pout-pout fish. The pout-pout fish is a rather dour character, prone to anxiety and general sullenness. But in each of the books, the pout-pout fish discovers that life is not as bad as he is predisposed to expect it to be. If you haven't read the pout-pout fish, you might understand his demeanor if you've ever known a teenager prone to sullenness, who might sit with their shoulders slouched in their hoodie sweatshirt, eyes downcast, questioning whether or not their lips are actually capable of turning upward into a smile and revealing that they actually have dimples. In the pout-pout fish and the big, big dark, Miss Clam yawns and loses her pearl down the abyss into the heap deep dark. The pout-pout fish comes to her and in an heroic act offers to go down in search of the yawn-gone pearl. As Mr. Fish swims deeper into the sea, however, his anxiety begins to grow and he has to reassure himself with this refrain: I'm fast as a sailfish, I'm strong as a shark, I'm smart as a dolphin, but I'm scared of the dark. After each refrain, a voice comes to the pout-pout fish, a voice from the darkness that pulls him deeper and forward, encouraging him to continue on his quest for Miss Clam's pearl. Eventually, though, Mr. Fish reaches the limit of his courage and cries out in despair, I won't keep swimming in this heap deep black. I know I made a promise, but this fish is heading back. And in that moment, Mr. Fish has given all he has. And when there is no courage left, no fortitude, no capacity to solve the problem or play the hero, that's when the voice he has been hearing in the darkness becomes a body. Miss Shimmer, we discover, has been the one encouraging Mr. Fish on his quest for the pearl. And now with him they join fin to fin, and they continue to swim down deeper until suddenly, amazingly, light shone in. Miss Shimmer called to Mr. Fish in his descent, but eventually the voice of Miss Shimmer wasn't enough. Eventually, the pout-pout fish could do no more, even with someone cheering him on from in front and behind. Eventually, Miss Shimmer had to be revealed in her body, a body like his own, to enable Mr. Fish to keep his promise and find the pearl. I love that line. Suddenly, amazing. It pairs well with our reading for today. John says, from his fullness we have received grace upon grace. Not from our determination and our effort, not from filling ourselves with good things, but simply as recipients of a gift. John says that the law was given through Moses. For John, the law is a grace, it is a gift, but it's like the voice of Miss Shimmer calling out to Mr. Fish in the darkness. The law, the prophets, the scriptures, they are an encouragement, a guide, a help in the dark. But the voice calling to us from the darkness still requires our courage and obedience, our ability and our responsibility. We still have to do the things that the Scripture says, which can often lead us to feeling like we're swimming deeper and deeper into the blackness. Some of you know this kind of biblical expectation intimately. You come to us from traditions we sometimes call high-demand religions, meaning that you were told quite forcefully that you needed to be in church multiple times a week, complete your daily Bible readings, make space for prayer in your prayer closet every day, and be sure you were making an effort to convert all of your neighbors to the faith, and if anyone would not convert, you were supposed to worry that they were hellbound. That is a high expectation of obedience and fortitude and ability on our part to maintain that expectation. Others have heard that word of the Scripture, taken it to heart, and adopted a do-gooder mentality. Volunteering for causes and spending hours in the service of others, giving to every charity that calls, advocating for the downtrodden with local, state, and national legislators. You take the posture of the prophet, the saint, and the martyr, and yet the world is still chaos. Life is still tumultuous. It feels still like you're swimming in the deep black. The majority of us, most likely, don't fall into either of these extreme categories of obedience. Faith has never really been that compelling to us. You know, we do our best, but there might be seasons when we're more faithful or less. There might be an increased season of devotion, but we tend to fall back into just trying to find the next bestseller to read, the new miracle diet plan to sign up for, get the kids in the best soccer program or piano lessons or gymnastics class, download that budgeting app, try to do a better job of making sure everything's on the calendar. Yes, God's in there somewhere. We try to be kind and nice generally when we're not judging others or feeling judged by them, when we're not envious or proud of the fact that others are envious of us. Maybe in these weeks, folks like us have experienced that darkness when you're trying to organize the party, get to the recital, wrap the gifts, buy the matching pajamas, send out the cards, bake the cookies, watch the movies. We've got to make Christmas perfect. You know you only get 18 Christmases with your kids. I was in a neighborhood this past week. Some of you live in it. And as I drove up a street there was this huge wooden Christmas tree painted green. And hanging on the tree were numbers to note how many days remained until Christmas. They'd be changed out every single day. Now, maybe this brings great joy and delight to the people who live in that home. But I can assure you that it incites a sense of panic within the neighbors who live around them. We're not ready yet for Christmas. And so whether we're trying to manufacture a good Christmas, or fight injustice, or prove our righteousness, or just trying to keep up with the tasks of the day, most of us, if we're honest, eventually get to that place where we cry out with Mr. Fish, I won't keep swimming in this deep black. That's when the cynicism and the bitterness and the self-loathing and the self-destructive behaviors begin. I know I made a promise, but this fish is heading back. Guilt, shame, feelings of failure. You had a plan. You knew the steps. You made the effort, but you couldn't do it. It was beyond our grasp. That's the moment we talked about last week, when we shine our artificial light and realize that that light actually creates death and not life. But it's exactly into that darkness that suddenly, amazingly, light shone in. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. It's a moment of revelation. Miss Shimmer is no longer just a voice calling from the dark. Miss Shimmer is there before Mr. Fish in a body like his own, to enable him to keep his promise. Jesus Christ is the voice of God, no longer coming in law and prophet, but in person. If the Scriptures reveal to us the will of God, Jesus reveals to us the heart of God. He reveals God to us. He illumines the darkness with His true and eternal light. That's been the entire message of this Advent season for us. Christmas can happen, but it doesn't happen because of anything that we do or accomplish. It happens suddenly, amazingly. The entire incarnation, the birth story of Jesus, is a series of surprises. Zechariah, when he enters the temple, does not expect the angel Gabriel to show up and promise him that his elderly barren wife will bear a son. Mary is going about her wedding plans when the angel Gabriel appears before her. Joseph plans to dismiss his pregnant wife quietly when the angel comes in the dream and tells him to marry her anyway. The shepherds are keeping watch in the fields outside of Bethlehem like they do every other night. The wise men in the east had not had on their calendar that this was the night that a new star was supposed to appear in the heavens. Herod thinks he will dominate the political landscape forever, and Caesar Augustus is celebrated as the bringer of the Pax Romana. And pan back a little bit from the scene in Bethlehem. You have Mr. and Mrs. Zebedee of Galilee trying to get James and John back to sleep in the middle of the night so that Dad can get out on the water in the morning with this new fishing business he's undertaken. Simon and Andrew are being pulled apart in yet another tussle in their home. In the town of Tarsus, a man and wife are discussing if they're going to start a family. If they have a son, they think they'll name him Saul. They hope he'll be a keeper of the Torah. In the land of the Gerasenes, there's a young boy deeply disturbed and nobody knows what to do with him. A young Jairus shadows his father to learn what it means to be a keeper of the synagogue. Mary and Martha and Lazarus play around the feet of their parents in their new home in Bethany. Life spins. The world turns. People pursuing their own plans, trying to make their way to their goals within the deep black, until suddenly, amazingly, their lives are entirely disrupted by the light of Jesus. The irony is we talk about Advent as this season of preparation. But how can you prepare for a surprise? You can't. You can't prepare for grace upon grace. For grace to be grace, it has to come as a surprise. It's not a planned for event. So how do you prepare for Christ if Christ comes as a surprise? I can't offer you any formula or strategy or plan or step-by-step method that promises to get you to the fullness of Christ. All we can do is wait and receive it when it comes. It's kind of like having a piano for a recital. And you know that the pianist is coming, but you don't know when the concert's going to be. So you keep the instrument tuned, you keep it dusted and in place. But then when the pianist arrives, he might actually show up with a banjo case and an entirely different concert to give. Or it's like you're hosting a dinner, but you don't know when the guest is going to get there. So you put out the china, you have candles on the table, fresh flowers in the center, but you don't really know when the food's to be ready, so you keep it simmering on the stove or warming in the oven. But it might just be that whenever the guest shows up, he's brought barbecue in paper plates. So what do? How do we wait? I can't offer you anything that will guarantee that the light will shine or when it will shine in your life or mine or in our city or nation or world. What I do believe is that in the waiting, we are invited to love. To love even when it is hard. Like Mr. Fish, we dive deep in search of Miss Clam's pearl, using whatever energy we have to try to bring wholeness to cracked lives, to listen to the voice that calls to us out of the darkness, and to live in faith that when all the energy we can muster is exhausted, or when we give up because we're just the kind of person who gets distracted, or when we're afraid to even make the dive into the deep and just peer over the edge, somewhere, whether on a hillside outside of Bethlehem or in a parking lot in Roanoke, on the road to Damascus, or in a hospital room at midnight, standing at the seashore in Galilee, or in front of the ball field, the dance studio, or just sitting on the stoop. Somewhere, someplace, suddenly, amazingly,